Okay, this first video lecture is going to walk you through a preview of this short story that you'll be testing on later in the week. If you have a Tuesday, Thursday class, this test will be Thursday. If you have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, this will be on Friday. So you will have to read this text closely on your own. If you rely solely on these video lectures, I doubt that you will be as successful on your test Friday. However, these video lectures are intentionally being created for you so that you have the opportunity to read closely, to pause and ponder the information that I am drawing to your attention from the text that will help you be close readers and good analyzers of complex text. So the short story that you're going to be reading and studying this week is The Feather Pillow by Horatio Quiroga. It is an example of Gothic literature. And so we're going to be looking at a couple of features of Gothic literature in this text as we discuss the story this week. Now, any good reader is going to pay attention to the title of any text that they read. And so you can always do a self-check when you finish reading the story by saying, okay, what does that title mean? So while you're reading the story, you want to pay attention to any references to feathers or pillows or anything related to that title. Now, the next thing that we want to do as good readers, and the focus of this first video lecture, is we are going to look closely at the first paragraph. So what I want you to do is I want you to put a square around that first paragraph. Good writers, skilled writers will often, in that introduction, not only hook their readers, but they'll lay clues to what might eventually happen later on in the text. They also present that exposition, right, where we get information about the characters and the setting. So the first thing that I notice when I look at this first paragraph, I do see a character's name. So I want you to circle that. Obviously, Alicia is going to be a protagonist. And then what I also notice as I just quickly scan through that first paragraph is I see another person's name, Jordan. So that's probably another character who's going to be important in the text. And of course, I've read and studied this short story in preparation for our work together this week. So I do know that Jordan is going to be another important main character. Now, we're previewing this text. So what I'd like for you to do is, I'd like you to scan through the text, and I'd like for you to just circle any place that you see these characters' names. Because if you're going to be a close reader of this text, you've got to be paying attention to what the characters are doing, right? That is definitely important when it comes to understanding and showing your understanding as that you're following the plot. You're following the actions of the characters and the events that happen as a result of those actions by those main characters. So that's what I want you to do right now, is I want you to just do a quick scan. Now I do see her husband here, so I do know that is who Jordan is. Now, what I need you to do is, as I'm modeling this annotation, I need you making annotations on your text, and you will be sending me copies of that text through Google Classroom. Those of you who are my online learners, I'm going to try to post a Kami assignment for you as a means of trying to annotate the text. If that doesn't work, then I will make an announcement in Google Classroom regarding an alternate assignment. So there's Alicia. Of course, it says she, right? So we know that that's probably Alicia, Jordan, Alicia, Jordan, Jordan. It says the doctor examined. So I think doctor might be a character that comes into play. There's Alicia again. There's Jordan. Okay, so I stapled this upside down. So let me undo that. Alicia, and again, we're just previewing the text. So there's Jordan, there's Alicia. Again, it's very important that when you read this text in its entirety that you pay attention to what happens between those characters as well as what happens to those characters. Alicia, and then here she is clamoring, speaking loudly her husband's name. There's Jordan, there's Alicia, Alicia. There's doctors again. There's Jordan. There's Alicia. On the next page, again, we're just previewing, right? Good readers always scan through the text before they read it. And we're just circling the characters' names. That will give you something to pay attention to when you read this text on your own closely. Now, this is posted in Savvas, so the oral reading is available there. So please use that as a resource. And then here on the last page of the text, I noticed the title. And we also know that good readers do look at the last paragraph or the last page of a long piece of text. Now, you can read this more closely if you'd like. I know that for me as a reader, sometimes I'll read the ending of a book before I finish the book. And even though some of my friends think that that may ruin the story for me, it oftentimes doesn't. But what do I know? We have the title here again. So that means that we need to pay attention to what's happening in this paragraph so we understand more information about the feather pillows. What an interesting last sentence. Human blood seems particularly favorable to them, and it is not rare to encounter them in feather pillows. So who is the them, right? Obviously, they enjoy human blood. Ooh, eerie, right? And perhaps they are in those feather pillows. Something that I noticed syntactically about this last sentence is this comma and this conjunction, right? So we do have a compound sentence here. And we know that we always put that comma in front of the conjunction. Here's our first independent clause. Human blood seems particularly favorable to them, right? That's an independent clause. And then it is not rare to encounter them in feather pillows. So there's another independent clause, right? And just a real quick review of syntax, right? An independent clause has a subject and a verb. Here's our subject. Here's our verb. What's this independent clause about? Human blood. What does, what's the verb about that blood? Seems, right? Here's our object, favorable to them. Here's our comma and conjunction joining those two independent clauses. Here's our subject, which is a pronoun it, and is always a verb. Okay? And again, I want to reference to you how that independent clause is being joined. The comma is in front of the conjunction because there are two sentences on both sides of that compound sentence. Okay, so now we're going to go back and we're going to look at the first paragraph. We're going to do a close read of the first paragraph. Again, what I model here, you need to annotate on your text, and you'll be sending those annotations to me through Google Classroom as one of your grades for active reading this week. So now let's read this first paragraph. And let's pay attention to the descriptions and the details that are included. Alicia's entire honeymoon gave her hot and cold shivers. A blonde, angelic, and timid young girl, the childish fancy she had dreamed about being a bride had been chilled by her husband's rough character. She loved him very much, nonetheless, although sometimes she gave a light shudder when, as they returned home through the streets together at night, she cast a furtive glance at the impressive stature of her Jordan, who had been silent for an hour. He, for his part, loved her profoundly, but never let it be seen. Okay, so this is an example of Gothic literature. So one of the characteristics of Gothic literature that I recognize immediately in this first paragraph is a character in torment, right? And torment means struggling, psychologically, emotionally, physically. Well, let's look at the struggle of our protagonist, Alicia, right? She's on her honeymoon, which should be a very happy time, but she's being described as having hot and cold shivers. Well, when do we shiver? We shiver when we're cold, and we shiver when we're afraid. So right off the bat, because I know the theme of this unit is about the allure of fear, I'm thinking, well, maybe she's shivering because she's afraid. A blonde, angelic, and timid young girl, the childish fancy she had dreamed about being a bride had been chilled, right? So here we have this word chilled, by her husband's rough character. Now look, we get a description of her husband as being rough, right? That is a negative attribute compared to all of these favorable attributes up here. Angelic, like an angel, timid, shy. So this is very positive. So she's different than her husband. So that difference perhaps might be causing there to be some torment or some struggle within Alicia. But she loved him nonetheless. Now here I'm drawn to this conjunctive adverb. I like to pay attention to those words that emphasize. Notice, because this conjunctive adverb is being used as a transitional expression, there are commas on both sides. Here's shudder again, right? We've got chilled, we've got shiver. So again, there is some description here that suggests that things are not well with Alicia. So she's kind of struggling. She might be in torment. When as they returned home through the streets, she cast a furtive. Now, furtive was a word I had to look up And furtive means like secretly or sneakily, right? So what's that mean? She's looking at her husband, Jordan. We now have a name for her husband, but she's looking at him so he doesn't catch her looking at him. So think about that. When do we do that? We do that when perhaps we're afraid of someone and we don't want them to see that we're looking at them. Or we may be uncomfortable around someone and we don't want them to know that we're looking at them. I don't know. I think that's an interesting behavior. We also get some important information about Jordan. As here he and his wife are on their honeymoon, which is supposed to be a very happy time. They're out walking together through the streets, but he's not talking to her. He has been silent for an hour. Now, in literature, right, we always want to pay attention to this element of foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is when writers provide clues or give hints about what will happen later on. So foreshadowing. And usually that foreshadowing means what happens isn't good. What happens isn't good. So as a reader, right, you see this contrast between Alicia, who's angelic and timid, and Jordan, who is quiet, and he's even described as having an impressive stature. Stature means physical body or presence, right? So if it's impressive, it's going to be big. So he's probably a big guy, and he's really quiet. And so we see that contrast. Oh, this probably isn't going to turn out well, right? She's shivering, she's chilled, she's shuddering. Okay, so I know as an experienced reader of literature that that's an example of foreshadowing, where there are clues being given to us as readers that if we pay attention to them, we'll know that something is not going to happen, or something's going to happen that isn't good. So you need to be paying attention to that when you read this text closely on your own. And again, you can listen to the audio in Savas using those great ebooks that we have access to. What else do I want to bring to your attention? Okay, so we have another characteristic of Gothic literature here, and that is repeated imagery. So we've got these shivers, we've got these chills, we've got this shuddering, right? And that could be a symbol of something. Now, I think what we need to be thinking about is if Alicia is indeed afraid of something, what is it that she is afraid of? So what is Alicia afraid of? And that can kind of guide your reading of the text and give you a purpose for your reading. What is she afraid of? What is happening that is causing this fear? What is this relationship like between she and her husband? Okay, so please make sure that you send me copies of these annotations and check the rubric so you know exactly how your work is going to be scored.